Okay, good afternoon. It's so wonderful to see you all. I'm Dr. Marilyn Mobley, Vice President for Diversity, Inclusion, and Equal Opportunity here at Case Western Reserve University. And I'm an English professor as well, so I always like to tell people that. We're so happy you're here for our Power of Diversity luncheon and our Power of Diversity lecture. And I need to slow my roll so I get all my words out correctly. I want to say a little bit about this lecture. This lecture originally started as a way of featuring our own faculty who were doing work related to diversity and inclusion. It was a way of highlighting their research, their scholarship, or even their service in the community. And today we actually get a chance to showcase someone whose scholarship, teaching, and work in the community will be the focus. But anyway, we started with our own faculty, and then we began adding national thought leaders the second year we did it. So I really appreciate, sometimes I see people showing up at all of them, whether they're our own faculty or national thought leaders. And so we appreciate this opportunity to talk about diversity and inclusion from the angle of our own professors and from our own professors who are nationally known thought leaders. Before I get into our introduction of our speaker today, I wanted to share a couple other events. Hope you don't mind a couple announcements, but I want you to know about our April 6th Understanding Changes in SIS student name and personal pronoun options. This is going to be featured in conjunction with the LGBT Center and the Center for International Affairs. It's a very important topic for our office and for many of us on campus, so I hope you will attend that Lunch and Learn. The Lunch and Learn is part of our Diversity 360 series. Diversity 360, as many of you know, is our campus-wide education around microaggressions, bias, privilege, and I left one out. Privilege and advantage. And we encourage people as they are going through Diversity 360 to also think about empathy. And so all four of those topics are part of Diversity 360. It's been going on since President Snyder said it would begin with her leadership team. So as a member of her cabinet and President's Council, we began Diversity 360 in 2014. It's been continuing. All incoming students participate, all incoming faculty participate, and all incoming staff are encouraged to participate as well. And we're working with HR to get that part of the offer letter, just as it is part of the offer letter for new faculty. So I wanted you to know that Diversity 360 is continuing, and our Lunch and Learns, which grew out of them. The Lunch and Learns are for people who want a little bit more time to talk freely about the topics that emerge from Diversity 360. Then on April 18th, we are hosting our annual Diversity Achievement Awards. We hope you've already nominated someone. We are nominating people in the categories of faculty, staff, senior leadership, graduate and professional students, undergraduate student leaders, department office, senior leadership, and a collaboration award. So those are all the categories. I can't go into a lot of detail. It started out with just 3 categories and it's gotten bigger. So we ask you to go online and look to see who you'd like to nominate, who you believe is worthy of that kind of recognition, and we will be sure to include them. Finally, on May 1st, on Tuesday, May 1st, is our multicultural student graduation. I encourage you to attend this. Students from around the campus come. We love it because people come with their families and they come to the microphone and they share their stories, but it's our way in our office of celebrating the various cultural groups that are here at the university in a graduation reception prior to commencement. All right? No more announcements. All right, that's it. So I would now like to introduce today's speaker. He is Professor Mark Joseph de Leona Bevis and Marguerite Haynam, Associate Professor in Community Development at the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Science. I want to get this correct. His research focus is mixed income development. That's actually how I heard about his work. Mixed income development as a strategy for addressing urban poverty, and he is the co-author of the award-winning book, Integrating the Inner City, The Promise and Perils of Mixed Income Public Housing Transformation. And as some of you know, President Snyder sometimes hosts faculty spotlight series, and I heard more about this book at that spotlight occasion. So it was great to hear the kind of work that a local scholar is doing that is having an impact on our thinking around the country. Joseph is also the founding director of the National Initiative on Mixed Income Communities, which conducts research and consulting projects in Cleveland and around the country. The center recently celebrated its 4th anniversary and is currently raising funds to be endowed as the Louis Cynthia Stokes Center on Inclusion and Equity. The center would be named in honor of the mother of the late Congressman Louis Stokes, which is absolutely wonderful. Joseph was currently appointed to the Board of Trustees of the George Gund Foundation. I heard that announcement. That is also wonderful. He is also a member of the External Advisory Group at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and is a member of the advisory board of the journal Cityscape, published by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Joseph also serves on the editorial boards of the Journal of Community Practice and Housing Policy Debate. He received his PhD from the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago. He was a postdoctoral scholar at the School of Social Service Administration at the University of Chicago, and a Harlech visiting scholar at Oxford University. Joseph received his undergraduate degree in government from Harvard University. We are excited about today's lecture and look forward to Dr. Joseph's sharing his knowledge, so please join me in welcoming him to the podium. His topic today is the everyday vigilance required to make real progress toward equity and inclusion. Please help me welcome him.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Really appreciate it. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Vice President Mobley, for the introduction, but for inviting me to be a part of this really important series. It's been a great lineup of speakers, so I'm honored to now be one in that great list. Thank you to all of you for coming out. This is a tough time of the year, of the semester. We're digging in. We're back from spring break. All right, I'm getting a wave in the back. You don't need this. You got this. Okay, so I'm good. This is just for the next. Perfect. You're going to make it easier on me. All right. Beautiful. Thank you. So thanks for coming out, despite this challenging time. A special thank you, Craig Zulig. So those who don't know Craig Zulig, he's in the back there. Could you wave, Craig? So Craig actually got a promotion. So now, tell us your new title at the Mandel School? So literally that's like a week in, or that's coming up soon? Monday. Associate Dean for Finance Administration. Basically he runs everything now over at the Mandel School, but he's just back from a leave, a medical leave, and I know his desk with his promotion is like this high, and here he is hanging out with us. So I really appreciate it, Craig. Thank you for being here. One other special guest I have to acknowledge. Some of you in the room know that I am far from the most popular Joseph on campus. I'm far from the most attractive Joseph on campus, and far from the most well-networked Joseph on campus. That honor would go to my wife, Melanie Patrice Labat Joseph, who's right there in the middle. She positioned herself strategically, so if anyone gets out of hand, she can basically get to any of you all at once, so be forewarned. All right, now excited to be here, and I'm going to jump right in because I've got a lot to share, but I want to get through it quickly enough that we can just have some dialogue. So probably try and talk for about a half hour, 40 minutes, and then open up for the rest of the time. So I've got 3 things that have happened recently that happened, and I was like, I can bring this up in my talk. And so there's 3 things I want to just put out there to kind of let it simmer a little bit, and then we're going to come back to them. So first of all, and let me get a sense of who's in the room. How many folks in the room are from the broader community? The community around Case, the community in Cleveland. Okay, wonderful and welcome. And then how many folks are from the Case Western community in the room? Okay, wonderful, excellent. So we've had a committee on the undergraduate experience here at Case for the last at least couple years. It's been a really intensive period of work, thinking about how to improve the experience for undergrads. And the reputation out there is we're not the most fun, party, vibrant school, but we still want to figure out how to make sure our undergraduates have a great experience. How many people have read that report? Good, okay, so a handful of folks. It's actually an excellent report. So I would encourage you, hop on the website, take a look at it. It's got a lot of wonderful ideas and recommendations and assessments, and it's very cold-eyed, direct in terms of some of our challenges, but there's a number of recommendations about how we can make this a better place for students. So my story is that I'm a member of the University Budget Committee, and so as such I got to sit in a financial summit last fall where there was a presentation about this report. So I'm sitting there listening to the presentation, thinking about the undergraduate experience, thinking about my own lens on the undergraduate experience, and waiting to hear certain things. And as you might imagine, some of the things I wanted to hear were about diversity and inclusion. And I didn't hear anything about diversity and inclusion in the presentation. And you can see here I've pulled out their recommendations, which again, they're excellent, they're smart, they're logical, they're far-sighted. But as you read them, I don't know if you can see them, none of them reference diversity or inclusion or equity. They're really close. So there's one on here that says, foster a thriving campus community. And my recommendation, I see it hasn't been made yet, but I think they're coming out with another version this spring, so fingers crossed, is that they would simply say, foster a thriving, inclusive community, campus community, right? To just signal what we're trying to do. So anyway, I'm sitting there listening, and I'm waiting to see, what was I waiting to see? Because I could have jumped in and said, hey, I haven't heard anything about race and equity, but I held back because what? Why did I hold back? Thank you. I was waiting to see, right? So that was an opportunity to say, well, we've been doing this work, we've been having these lectures, we've been talking about it, and it was a room full of the leaders of the campus, right? Someone's going to say, hey, wait a second, what about race and equity? And so no one did. And so finally I raised my hand and I said, you know, it's really interesting to get a sense of where you are in an inclusion and diversity process to see who in the room raises the question about diversity and inclusion. And I just let that sit there for a while. So now the second part of that story is that a colleague of mine who was in the room, very dear colleague, maybe a week later, we happened to be in a meeting together, and he came up to me and said, Mark, I heard what you said at that meeting, and I really appreciated what he said. And this is an older white male. And he said, I want to see if I understood what you were saying. Were you saying that I or anyone else, you were listening to see if I or anyone else would raise the point that no reference to equity and inclusion? And I said, yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was saying. He said, so wait, as a white male, it would be okay if I raised that issue? And I said, wow, this is a super thoughtful man. This is a dear colleague. This is a respected person at this university, a brilliant man, who at this stage of his racial equity journey doesn't think it's okay for white men to raise the question of race. So that's story number one. Story number two is a little tougher, and it just happened 2 weeks ago. And most of you in the room would know, right? Not a proud moment for our university. Councilman Kevin Conwell walking down the block, just a block away from here, and a call had gone out to the cops of someone mumbling to themselves from a student. And so cops had been sent looking for a person who fit this description. Unfortunately, they rolled up on our councilman and asked him to show his ID, to show who he was. And you can imagine he was not very happy. My sense is it went along rather quickly. Once they figured out he was the councilman, things moved along. There were 2 cop cars sent, is my understanding. I don't know all the facts. To our credit, to our university's credit, President Snyder immediately called to apologize and acknowledge from the very, very top that that was a problem. And my understanding is that the university police are going to now do some additional training to do this. So we'll come back to this story. And there are many, many sides to this story. I think if we have time, we can certainly put ourselves in the shoes of the police right? Who were told to look for a black man wearing a blue hat and a brown coat, and apparently he was a black man wearing a blue hat and a brown coat, right? So there are many sides to this. I'm not going to immediately jump in on one side or the other. However, we can all agree that's not a good thing to have happen on your campus. All right, finally, some of you may have seen New York Times. I hope you've seen. If you have not seen, you need to be aware of this study. It just came out last week, March, whatever. A study by, you may have heard the name by now, Raj Chetty. He's a professor at Harvard. He comes out every 3 years or so with a kind of groundbreaking study that hits the front page of all newspapers and gets us talking about social issues. He and his colleagues have come forth with some pretty incredible findings. They've tracked individuals, millions of individuals, using census records and tax data to see where you start out in your family income and where you end up. And basically, here's the picture. These are men over here. These are women over here. These are white men in yellow and black men in blue. Same over here, black women, white women. And what you find is among men, no matter what income level you start out, there's a gap in where you end up. But what's fascinating is you don't see that among women. So the argument that is said this is about some racial condition, those who would say that black people just aren't as whatever, smart, work hard, whatever, well then you have to explain what it is between women and men that's different within black people. I'm sure they will figure out a way to construct something, right? But this is tough data to walk around. Here's the factoid that really is staggering. When you compare black men raised in the top 1%, millionaires, the chance of a black millionaire being incarcerated is the same as a white man earning $36,000. I'm sure you can explain it, right? Those unethical, corrupt black millionaires. But you got to ask, there's got to be a few of those white millionaires too, right? So why would this jump out in the data? All right, so let's sit with that, those facts, those incidents for a little while. Let's talk about Case Western a little bit. We have 5,125 undergraduate students, and we have just 223 African American among them, right? This is not news. This is not something the administration is happy about. This is something we've been working on for years, but this is where we are. We have, my colleagues, 1,258 faculty. We have 39 African American faculty, 3% African Americans on campus, right? So this is just the context. But we're not in Boise, Idaho. We're not in Vermont, right? We are in the midst of a city that's majority black. We're in the midst of, even if you said a region is 30% black. 30% black in our region, Northeast Ohio, to 3% and 4%. And of course, the folks hosting this venue, the whole reason we're having these conversations is because you all are working so hard on exactly these issues. Michaela Hayford, I'm so glad you're here. How are you? Let's talk about my school for a little bit. As folks in the audience who know me, I like putting up the mirror, shining the spotlight. So how are we doing at the Mandel School? Actually doing pretty well, proportionally. So we have 27% African American students out of about 683 or so. So it's interesting. We have almost as many African Americans in that Mandel School building as are on the entire campus. 187 to 223. Now, several of those, many of those are actually online, because our online population is growing, so they're not actually on campus, but they're part of our, Nancy's like, who are those? But before we pat ourselves on the back and go skipping off into the future, we've now honed in on our graduation statistics. We have a disparity in our black-white graduation at the Mandel School. We don't graduate our black students and our white students at the same rate. So black students graduate at fewer of them graduate. So we've got an issue too, and the faculty and we are digging in on that, right? So we've got work to do even at our own school. All right, let me move along. There's good news. And it was great that Vice President Mobley was able to list many of the things I'm about to say. So let's pat ourselves on the back for the work that we are doing. Who in the room has done Diversity 360 so far? Diversity 360, excellent. So if you haven't done it, hop on the website, learn about it. Vice President Mobley mentioned it before. It's an excellent, groundbreaking way to get everyone involved and at least having one level of shared awareness and exposure. Sustained dialogue. I know my wife's sustained dialogue team is in the room. Can you all raise your hands? Who's in Melani's sustained dialogue team? All right. Excellent. Anyone else involved in sustained dialogue in the room? Fabulous. So here's another opportunity on our campus to have sustained, durable conversations, build trust, build relationships, start to open up a little bit about these difficult issues. We have a wonderful Office of Multicultural Affairs. John Killings is here. We have Diversity Award nominations. Janetta, I think that closed yesterday or today, the nominations, right? Okay, so we got nominations that we do. We're going to be having a celebration. We have a wonderful, it's not just MLK Day. We have a whole week of activities around MLK Day. We have a strong student We Belong Here movement. The reason I said I was so glad Michaela was here, because she was one of the co-founders of We Belong Here among students. There's a lot of good stuff going on. We have a great team of folks at the Office of Inclusion, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity, right? So there's a lot of work, there's a lot of good stuff going on, and they have, if you haven't seen it, an annual diversity report where they are tracking, they are reporting, they are holding us accountable to what we're trying to achieve. So that's the good news. There's work going on, but obviously we've got to redouble and triple our efforts. We have a historical marker on our campus now, and I know Vice President Mobley is very excited and proud of this. I have no idea what it took. I can only imagine what it took to have this. So if you haven't seen it, at the corner of Adelbert and Euclid, that talks about the history of our institution and being a part of the Underground Railroad and abolitionist movement. So we're tracking that history on our campus. I'm also glad Michaela's here because I know she was involved in this, the We Belong Here movement. Made a suggestion that we have a resident hall named for an African-American pioneer. And so we have a resident hall that's named for Stephanie Tubbs Jones, who is an alumna of the university, and there it is there. So there are a lot of very, very good things going on. There's one more thing on this campus in terms of happy news that makes me really, really happy that I just have to tell you guys about. And what do you think that is? It's kind of related to diversity and inclusion, but it's a bit of a stretch.
New provost.
That actually makes me very happy. We have an African-American provost who is coming, Ben Vinson, who's a dean at George Washington University, will be our next provost. So I don't know if you've heard that news. I've communicated with him. He's enthusiastic, he's energized, he's excited to be here, so that's really exciting. Kwame, what makes me happy on this campus? What makes me really, really happy on this campus?
Perhaps we have a great Mandel School that's in social justice work.
We do have a great Mandel School. All right, I need to, Sue Wishboratz knows, because you're sitting next to what makes me really, really happy. We have Melanie Patrice Labat Joseph on campus, who makes me really, really happy. So, see, that's the cool thing when you're doing a talk, like you can do anything you want to do. It's really cool. You can just kind of have fun with it. But it makes me really happy. And she's my supporter. I wouldn't be up here in front of you all without her support, so I need to make sure I say that. All right, enough. And by the way, if you haven't heard, she just was on a wonderful panel talking about STEM with the Jewish Federation of Cleveland. Okay, so what is it going to take to get super serious? We talk a lot about racial equity and inclusion, and I gave a version of this talk in the fall to Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. And what I pushed myself to think about was, what if we really wanted to do it? Like really, really, really. We gave ourselves all the time we needed. So let's say we give ourselves 100 years. So we've got 100 years, but at the end of 100 years, we're really going to be in a place where black people are not on the bottom of everything. So what would it really take? That's what I want to talk about and share with you. So I'm going to give you two tools, is what I came up with. And so if you don't take away anything else, although, you know what, you're going to take these away, because in your seats, you have a takeaway that's going to remind you what we talked about. I'm going to give you two tools today. One is a racial equity lens, and the second is racial equity vigilance. Because I believe that what it's going to take to truly make durable change is that we need to apply a racial equity lens to everything. Hiring, resource allocation, any decisions we make, our interactions, our eye contact, we need to apply a racial equity lens to it. And we need to do it with vigilance. That means almost every microsecond we have to do this work. We cannot slip, we cannot go put it, oh, I didn't think of that. All right, and I'm going to give you two mnemonics to help remind you this. Kwame's smiling because I am going, in fact, Nancy as well. We've got our two Ghanaians in the middle row there. These are Adinkra symbols from Ghana, and we have a travel study course that I led, and Professor Mark Chupp went with us last year to Ghana. And so these are Adinkra symbols. Here we are in Ghana, and that's actually Dr. Chupp right there, making our Adinkra banner, which is going to be going up in the Mandel School. And here's Michaela, actually, works out. Michaela's right there, keeping an eye on him, who, by the way, Michaela also has Ghanaian heritage. We got to meet her wonderful uncle, which was amazing. So Akkoben is one of the symbols. It actually means vigilance. The sign is a war horn. And so it was the sign of a war horn for vigilance. So that's a sign for vigilance. And then for lens, there wasn't a symbol for it, but Nyansopo means intuition, intelligence, foresight. The phrase that goes with Nyansopo is a wise person can figure out the right way to do something. A wise person can figure out the right way to do something. So Akkoben and Nyansopo are going to help us remember our lens and our vigilance. So the question, so I've given you those two tools I want you to think about, and then I want you to walk away and chew on a question. Where are you in your racial equity journey? Because I think to solve this, to really solve this, we're going to need a whole bunch of people, a critical mass of people, to ask themselves, where am I in my racial equity journey? And it is totally okay to say, I don't even know what a racial equity journey is. I don't even know what you're talking about right now. That's fine. So then ask somebody. Who can you ask? I went to this talk, this guy was talking about racial equity journey. I really don't know. Some people were nodding. I don't know what he's talking about. What do you think he's talking about? Some of you know that you're at very, very early stages. Something's happened recently or a while ago to kind of open your eyes a little bit, and you're knowing you've got somewhere to go, but you're not sure what to do with it. Others are well on their way. They've been on this journey for years, decades. They're tired, they're burned out, they're traumatized. They can show you their wounds around this, and they're trying to figure out, what do I do, right? You got folks starting their journey. I've been at it for so long, I don't want to have another racial equity conversation, right? So we're all at different points. That's okay, that's the whole point. But what we need to do is be on a journey and then figure out how to move on it. So again, my request to you is to ask yourself and have a conversation, where am I? And what would be my next step, wherever you are? Quick word about me for those who don't know. So you heard about my center, and Kwame is a research assistant there. I don't think we have anyone else in the room. Well, Dr. Chupp is one of our partners, and Heather Lentz is also one of our partners with National Initiative, and Craig helps keep the money flowing and the proposals going and all of that great stuff. So this is our center. This is what we do. We're about 4 years old. We've got work all around the country now, so that's exciting. We get to see this work happening in different places. We also have work here in Cleveland. The Commodore building on the corner of Ford and Euclid is very important mixed income building in our community. So if you're interested in that, we'd love to talk about it, tell you about our project there. We also have an effective neighboring project. We do research, we publish books, we do consulting, we do workshops. I mentioned our Effective Neighboring in Cleveland project, And I love showing this picture just as a vision of where we would like our blocks to look like. This is an actual block in Cleveland. You could walk there from here. This is 128th between Larchmere and Shaker. And it's one of our 2 case study blocks. We're doing a micro study of a block to understand how it works, how it functions, how folks interact. And in fact, Peter Whitehouse was in the room when we went before the IRB. So you heard us talk about this project, and thank you, sir. You were one of the supporters in the room for the importance of this work, so I appreciate that. All right. It's no news to anyone. You're here because you know we have a race problem in our country, deep racial inequity, deep racial segregation, deep racial prejudice. That's not news. I think what we don't acknowledge is we have no idea what to do about it. We're really stuck, I think, as a country. We really are. We're doing things, we're talking, we're coming to talks, we're lecturing, but I don't know that we know what to do about it. And I think we've got to figure out. I think we're spinning our wheels, and in fact, honestly, I think we're slipping backwards. More on that in a second. Here's how bad this can feel. So there was a nice article about our research, some of you may have seen it in September of last year, that came out in the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Here are some of the comments that we received. Yeah, Ann Flam is like, no, don't look at the comments. Don't look at the comments. But you know, sometimes it's instructive, and the sociologist side of me is like, let's go look at the comments to see what's happening. So someone said, mixed income developments will all inevitably fail when you combine people who have worked hard for their money and are proud of their homes and communities with those who don't pay a dime for their housing and have never had pride in anything. You are asking for failure. This is our fellow Clevelander. This could be your neighbor. This could be your family member, right? So we can put this off as something that's out there. This is very real. Let's see what happens when we put people with nothing to lose, little pride or conscience, next to hardworking, family-oriented people. A lot of coded language in there. They didn't say anything about black people. They didn't say anything about white people. But I think we all know who's who. Does anyone not know who's who? This person I really like because they're so thoughtful. I'll translate. Allow me to translate for you what this article really is telling you. How do we force poor people with no motivation? I love the kind of starkness of it. Not like little motivation, minimal motivation. Poor people have no motivation or marketable skills, so they got nothing to offer, who have been living on welfare for generations, probably true in some cases, public housing hastily built, probably true, in nice neighborhoods made of hardworking, all hardworking. White people work so hard. You guys are awesome. You just work so hard. Isn't that interesting? Every single one of these is about the hardworking white people. No white person ever just got something, inherited anything, got lucky, caught a break, right? Hardworking, tax-paying, black people don't pay taxes, of course, home-owning, black people don't own homes, so that the parasites. So that's what gets me, right? It's not bad enough. These are human beings this person is talking about, but they're parasites. This is our reality. This is our starting point today. This is where we are after civil rights movement. Well, I'll come to that in a second. The parasites can soak up the benefits. So Debbie Irving, those of you who heard me talk know that this is my book recommendation of the last year, and it is again this year, although now I'm recommending Dream Hoarders as my second book recommendation, and Everyday Anti-Racism by Micah Pollock as another one. But if you got to pick one, please read Waking Up White by Debbie Irving. White people should certainly read it, but everyone should read it. I think it's important for all of us to understand. She does a wonderful job of explaining how she went from someone who just didn't see these things, as she said, examining the world through a telephoto lens, thinking of communities and individuals, kind of like those comments just did in Cleveland.com, without putting it in context. And she's learned racism is and always has been the way America sorted and ranked its people in a bitterly divisive and humanity-robbing system. Parasites, anyone? So how do we make progress in the face of that? We have to combat what has been called historical illiteracy. And as a country, right, there are other countries that are really known for honoring their history, all of their history, the bad parts of their history. Not us, right? We kind of want to put that behind us. But we have to combat that. We have to know all of our history. We have to avoid what's been called convenient ignorance. Convenient, like, I didn't know that, I didn't realize that, in a convenient way, and I don't really want to know. So I'm not curious about it. Darren Walker, who's the president of Ford Foundation, described us as the land of the brave, the home of amnesia. And we have to acknowledge the intentional and structural causes of inequity. We can absolutely have a conversation about behavior. We can absolutely have a conversation about culture. I welcome that conversation. Trust me, studying mixed income development, studying public housing, there's a deep conversation to be had around that. But we have to acknowledge the structure and intentional part of this challenge. We have to have a basic understanding of how we got here, and not just the history, but the way that today's realities continue to be shaped by that history. Right? I think when we talk about it, we still want to put it in the past. We don't see how today's realities are still very much shaped by that. I'm going to speed up so we can keep going. So very quick, right? What do we need to be walking around with in our heads? The slavery, Jim Crow period, what Ta-Nehisi Coates and Brian Stevenson now refer to as 100 years of a terrorist campaign. Right? So they're taking that language of terrorism and applying it back to our own history, literally terrorism against black folks and white folks who were trying to be allies to them. And of course, the civil rights movement. And then I was thinking about, so what happened since the civil rights movement? Like, what's been going on? Like, there's no easy way to say 70s, 80s, 90s, like what's been going on? The way I came up with to describe it is what I call the advancement retrenchment pendulum. Is we've kind of been swinging back and forth and back and forth. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Had a big tick. I don't want to push this button. Dr. Shupp, can I avoid pushing this button? Can I wish it away? Did it not happen? Tock.
That's great.
Right? This is what we're in. So then ask yourself, well, how are we going to get anywhere with this ticking and talking? Right? Sure, the next tick might be great. But then we're just going to have a talk if the pattern repeats itself. And if it's been 40 years of this pattern, why would that change? Well, one reason is our country's changing. But in the current talk, the era of Trump, this translates into questions about us versus them, and who gets to be in the us, and who is in the them. And this real battle between belonging and othering. We are in an othering era in our country. The other. Fear of the other, disdain of the other, blame of the other. That's just been ratcheted up. And you'll see on your cards that this notion of belonging and othering is really important in my conception of a racial equity lens. We have to think more about how in this room are we promoting belonging? And what have we done, maybe unintentionally, to other folks? I'm sure there's someone in the room who could give us, actually, here's what happened that made me feel a bit othered as I entered this room. And we have to be open to that and to hearing that. All right. So as I thought about paths to our 100-year future, I thought about 3 possible ways we could get to the promised land. One would be what I'd call the status quo, this tick and talking. We zigzag our way. right? We have some moments of uplift, and then we have some moments of down, and we just kind of go up and down and up and down. But you end up and you wonder, have we gotten anywhere? Our schools are more segregated today than they were 50 years ago. Our schools are more segregated today than they were 50 years ago. So we've had some high points, but we're not getting anywhere. All right, a second option might be a social movement, right? People say, eventually there's going to be a revolution. You can't push people down only so long. They're only going to take so much. Maybe. We've certainly had revolutions in history. It's persuasive or it's forceful. It could be either way. They would have to be high intensity. It would require us to get a critical mass of people to put down the Game Boys, turn off the TV, go away from their substance of choice. And we all have one or another, minus sweets and candy. And focus for an extended period of time. The problem with these movements is I think the gains are fleeting. So you might have it, we might win that day, but does it last over time? Or do 50 years we look back up and we're like, whoa, how did we get back here? I would like to propose a third path. And I call it awareness to vigilance. An awareness to vigilance campaign. And what I like about it, it's deep, it's durable, and it's viral. It uses what we can think of as a new kind of technology of viral spread. Things can move very, very quickly. I could come up with a cool dance right now, and they put it on the video, and someone's like, man, check out that cool dance. And someone tomorrow in Nairobi is doing that dance. So why can't we use that for racial equity awareness? What if I could figure out how to get my racial equity lens to go viral? We could suddenly have millions of people doing something, right? Black Panther made over $1 billion. So however many people have watched that movie in just 6 weeks across the globe. What if I snuck my racial equity lens into Black Panther somehow? Right? So we can think, we can be strategic. My point is like the diagram. If we just find the right strategic points to drop those pebbles of racial equity, vigilance, and lens, they can spread. And maybe once we do that, that's how we get to the billions, and that's how we get to 100 years worth of progress. I love what Dr. Nazir says. She works at the Living Cities. Some of you may know that national organization. She says, so even as we're attacking big, seemingly intractable problems, it begins with checking our personal biases. And so for me, that's kind of a key revelation is, wait a second, we just start with ourselves. But wait, I control me. I can decide to start with myself. I can decide to start doing something differently. If the 70 of us in this room decide right now we're going to do something differently, that's 70 more people that are doing it than an hour ago. We can do that. And if the 70 people tell one more person, all of a sudden there's 140 people tomorrow. And what if, and what if, and what if? Lisa Vehe and I, she's sitting back there, she's my racial equity buddy. We're actually putting something like that into play in Shaker Heights, but don't tell anyone. So it starts with ourselves. Really quickly, we often think of change happening like this. If you think of the gears as a system, and we think about systems change advocacy, we've got to change the educational system, we've got to change the criminal justice system, we've got to change the health system, and we focus on the system. And then we hope that the change will come down from the system to all of us. So here's my thought. I think we do awareness to vigilance with us. We start working on our own mindset, our own awareness, our own conversations, and the change goes that way. Because some of us are actually the superintendents and the council people and the judges and the teachers and the coaches and whoever is part of the system. And so then the system change also happens and it goes this way. So that's part of my vision of how this would play out. At an individual level, it would go from awareness to getting informed to being transformed, and I think this is where we get stuck. Because we start to get informed, and then we start to get to the point where we realize, oh man, I'm gonna have to be different if I'm really gonna do this. And that's scary, because I don't know who that person is. And I don't know, my friends won't know who that person is. And in fact, I don't know who my friends are anymore, right? So this transform step is, I think, where a lot of us are like, you know what? I'm good, y'all go ahead. And then we get to vigilant. On the other side of being transformed, we start doing things a different way all the time. At a collective level, that would look something like a shared awareness and a common language, the kind of conversations that are happening in Diversity 360 and Sustained Dialogue, right? We start having common language. A shared racial equity lens, we start sharing a way of doing this and looking at the world together. We start taking more informed action on policy and practice. Then I think we can get to systems change. I think our problem is we try to jump to systems change without doing the work, doing the body building and the mind building and the relationship building that it takes. And then finally, we can't rest on our laurels when the system changes. We have to protect the system change. Just look at what's happening right now. We had some systems change, and now we're seeing it systematically pulled apart, piece by piece by piece. So we have to learn that lesson. How do you do systems change and then hardwire it in so it cannot be so easily pulled apart? It's not that they didn't think about that, but we just have to get even wiser, even smarter, because we've seen how quickly change like this could be turned into the exact opposite. We have to be able to define and talk about racism. Hopefully most of you in this room, you're an informed audience, and so you would know about interpersonal racism, institutional racism, structural racism, and internalized racism. For me, and we can come back to this in Q&A, of those 4 forms, and again, if you're sitting here, you're like, I didn't know there were 4 forms of racism. That's fine. Please ask somebody. So what's up with those 4? What's the difference between institutional racism and structural racism? Right? What, does that matter? And isn't interpersonal racism really where things are today? My statement would be the most pernicious, the worst, the most dangerous of all of these is internalized racism. And we can come back in Q&A to debate why that is or is not. All right, so let's get to this racial equity lens I've been talking about. I wanted to make it as simple, walk-aroundable, that it could fit on a little card as possible. So this is my gift to you. And it's a working gift, so feel free. If structure doesn't work for you, swap it out. If you have a 4th thing, add it in, right? This is meant to be open source. But here's what I think of. I think of 3 things we need to think about when we look at any situation. What's the structure? What's going on in terms of perception? And what's going on in terms of belonging? If I could wave a magic wand and people all over this campus, all over this city, all over this state were asking about structure, perception, and belonging every day, I think we would start to get in a very different place. I think we'd start to see very different decisions. So what do those mean? Focus on structural causes and solutions. Focus on changing perceptions. What's the narrative that's running in your head about black people and about white people? And how do you change that narrative in your head? It's in all of our heads. And it's not your fault, right? Our current level of discussion is, well, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. She's a racist, but I'm not a racist, right? That person who's telling you they're not a racist does not understand what's going on, because they are a racist. I'm a racist. We're all racist because we are swimming in racist waters. We're breathing racist air. This country has had those waters and airs for hundreds of years. It's not our fault. It's not our fault. But to deny it and to say, well, that person's a racist over there, the real question is, what's the real question? Not are you a racist, but are you an anti-racist? Everyday anti-racism, Micah Pollock. Are you an anti-racist? Which means, are you actively, intentionally working with vigilance to undo the racism in your head and to undo the racism in your world? That's the only important question. If you want to debate being a racist or not a racist, you're not helping our situation. And are you promoting belonging over othering? In any situation, there's so many situations where we unintentionally other people because we're so content to go into our cliques and our connections and who we feel comfortable with, and we stay in our comfort zones. We don't mean to, but we're othering people all the time. And so we have to be checking ourselves. Am I doing anything unintentionally or intentionally to exclude anyone? I won't go through this in detail, but you have it on your sheet. So this sheet has the details of each of those levels of the racial equity lens. I've also put in some examples, if it's a little abstract, for, hey, what if we're going to ask these questions at Case Western? But you can think of many, many, many more questions you could be asking every single day using this lens. So perceptions, belonging versus othering. All right, let me finish up by just saying, so that's the lens. What's this vigilance thing about? How do we practice racial equity vigilance? So here are my steps to racial equity vigilance. Constant self-education. You will never, ever learn enough about this topic. So just get on a path of always having at least one thing you're reading or watching or looking at to inform you. You could do it for the rest of your life, and you would still have more to learn about this topic. So get started and be consistent. Doesn't mean you can't curl up with that romance novel every now and then. But this should be a part of what you're doing. And if you need advice about what to read, I've put it on the other side of this sheet. So if you're like, that sounded good, Mark, what should I read? Here's what you should read. All right, are we action-oriented enough? Is this what we're looking for? All right, excellent. Tell people now, because they say that we academics don't think about action and real stuff, that you walk away from a talk like, oh, that was nice to think about, right? I want you thinking about it. Well, I do want you thinking about it, but I want you to act. And if you don't know what you should do, then ask somebody. Listen more to people who are different from you, right? Get out of your little echo chamber. Get a racial equity buddy. I already told you Lisa Vehe is mine, and I have others. Get someone who you trust, who you could be a bit vulnerable with, and who's on their journey. They'll hold you accountable. There'll be a person who's there to ask questions about. So seriously, there's a homework assignment. Tonight, call someone, email someone, and say, hey, I'd like you to be my racial equity buddy. I'll say, what are you talking about? Here's what I'm talking about. Interrogate your assumptions. Why do I think that? Why did I do that? Why did I sit here? Why did I feel uncomfortable? Why did I react that way? Right? Don't just be comfortable in your routine, right? Question yourself. Have your racial equity buddy question you. Why did you act that way? Why didn't you want that person in our group? Lean into discomfort. Don't lean away from discomfort. Lean into discomfort. If you're feeling a little uncomfortable, good, you're doing the right thing. If you're feeling totally comfortable, bad. Right? Lean into something, feel a little bit uncomfortable, and get a tougher skin. All of us, but my fellow black people, and trust me, I'm with you. I am so angry. I cannot even tell you. And don't get me started about my sons, right? And we can talk about my daughter, but let's go back to the New York Times stuff. So I'm angry. I don't want to deal with it, but we got to get a tougher skin, or folks are just not going to be able to engage with us. We're not going to get anywhere. Right? We cannot fly off the handle as angry as we are, as traumatized as we are, and it's hard. But we have to figure out how to get a tougher skin and stay in conversations. But that's everyone. That wasn't just black people. That was just a particular little side note. We all have to get a tougher skin. By the way, yeah, this person I talked about earlier, the person who asked me the question, do you want me to talk as a white male? And I saw that as an opening, and I said, hey, here's a talk I did. You might be interested. Here's this, whatever. I won't give a lot of details because they'll tell you who the person is, but they then asked me a request. And the request had a racial dimension in it, which I brought to light. And he was incredibly defensive about it. And here I thought we'd opened up a little racial equity buddiness by the nice conversation we had about whether he should talk about it. And he just shut down. Right? So we have to have a tough, we cannot get so defensive. We're not going to get anywhere. But I know it's hard. I know it's hard. Build anti-racist muscle I talked about. Micro-intentional actions. Who do you look at? Where do you sit? Who do you hang out with? Where are you going to eat dinner? Where are you going to buy stuff? Literally every single decision you make. When you walk out of this room and you're going to see a bunch of people leaving the building, are you going to make eye contact with them? Are you going to make eye contact with some of them or others? Trust me, that's going to make a difference in one of those people's lives. In fact, I had an interview with someone for a project I'm doing, and when I was getting off the phone, he said, Mark, I want to tell you, I was at your talk in the fall. You talked about eye contact. I've been doing it in my neighborhood because I usually just say hi and keep walking. He said, it is so invigorating to connect with people. It is so humanizing. So micro to that level, and then it's the ripple effects. It starts making a difference. And then please use your racial equity lens. You've got a lot of spheres of influence where you can do this. So where do I do all this vigilance stuff? Here's where you do all your vigilance stuff. Plenty of places to do it. All right, finally me. I hereby pledge to model and coach racial equity vigilance. I'm doing it right now. Thank you. You're helping me check that box. As you heard, we are changing the name and focus of our center. The National Initiative on Mixed Income Communities will be becoming the Louise Cynthia Stokes Center for Equity and Inclusion. We're broadening our work. We have a project that I may have mentioned that we're doing with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. Just came from a meeting an hour ago. I have not done well on this. We had a meeting of black faculty, first one in several years, where we got together and just said, what's up with this disparity? And that was a couple months ago. And I took a bunch of notes. I sent the notes out to everyone. It's like, all right, we had some great ideas. We haven't done anything. We all got swallowed up in spring semester. So I hereby pledge to you, I am going to email my colleagues and say, what's our next step? All right. Thank you very, very, very much. And let's get some questions and comments. Kwame is going to take the mic around, and we're going to preempt. This mic is for the live stream, so even if you have the most booming, sonorous voice, please use the mic. Yes, sir.
You stated that.
Do you mind introducing yourself? It'd be good to everyone to know.
My name is Benjamin Betts. I'm a member of the community here in Cleveland.
Uh-huh.
My question, you talked about African Americans being thick-skinned.
Yeah.
How can you be thick-skinned when you keep hearing the same old, not yet, just wait? It was heard 100 years ago, 50 years ago, and it's being heard by this administration today.
Yeah.
The time's not right, just wait.
Right.
How can you remain thick-skinned during those times?
It's really hard. So, number one, I didn't say don't act. I didn't say don't do something. And so if you're doing something and not asking anyone's permission, right? If you're using any form you have, then when you hear just wait, you're not waiting. You're moving. Now, that's number one, is start moving, start acting. Don't wait for anyone's permission. And figure out in which of your spheres of influence, whether yourself, your family, your friends, your clubs, your church, there's got to be a sphere of influence where you can start. So that's number one, because that helps. If someone tells you to wait, but you know you're moving, with or without them, it still is angering to hear that and frustrating. And I think that's where you've got a choice of how to react. Stephen Covey, he's got the 7 Habits of Successful People, talks about the pause button between stimulus and response. Someone says something goofy, infuriating, and then you've got a reaction. But there is a pause button where you can decide, okay, how am I going to react to that racist statement? And unfortunately, I think it is on us. It's on them to eventually not make the statement, but I think it's also on us to have the pause to say, okay, what if I assume positive intent? What if I assume that there's something in this person where there's a positive place this is coming from? Even if it's just, this has been their experience, and they just don't know any better. They've only been around people who will share that thing. What if I latch onto that and figure out, how do I make this an educational moment? How do I respond in a way, right? If one of my lenses, let's put our racial equity lens to work. There's perception, there's a narrative. They're probably expecting you to react a certain way. Because black people, black men have reacted that way. What if you flip that switch on them and react a different way they weren't expecting, so that they walk away from that conversation going, huh, I thought that was going to make him angry. But he actually slowed down, paused, and made me think about something, right? That's not easy to do, and none of us are going to be able to do that in every single situation. But the vigilance is, oh, I didn't do it that time. I lost my cool. Next time I'm going to do it. Oh, didn't do it that time. Next time I'm going to do it. Last thing I'll say, racial equity buddy. That buddy who you can say, man, they got me again. And that buddy can say, hey, man, did you blah, 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 right? Having someone else who you can play that off of, more people like that is also really, really important.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments, please, yes. And thanks for introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm Mark Swain Fox with Facing History and
Hey, Mark,
Ourselves.
glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk. This is fantastic. Really appreciate it. So I love what you were talking about, the system change advocacy and sort of flipping the switch on that, sort of instead of focusing on the system, focusing on the self. How do you do that at the same time? And I'm looking at your card that starts with looking at structure, right? How do we do both of those things at the same time? If you could clarify.
Well, flip the card over, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mark.
Yes.
Since that mic doesn't seem to be working, can you repeat the question, kind of paraphrase?
Sorry.
Okay, it's not working for you?
It's working for them, it's not.
Oh, I'm sorry, right. So if you can, absolutely. So Mark's question was that the structure flip he liked. The idea of let's start with ourselves if we want to get structural change. But then when you look at the lens, the first thing you see is structure. So a couple of things. One is on the flip side, I'm giving you just some ideas of action steps. The third one is build bridges, build a new relationship with someone different from you, right? What if you use that relationship to talk about structural stuff? What if that person different from you is in another position in the structure, right? So you do a lot of educational work, schools. What if you haven't interacted with the school janitor much? And you're like, you know what? I'm going to figure out a way to have a conversation with the school janitor. But I'm going to talk to him about structure, right? How do things work here? Who has the say? Who gets to make decisions around here? When you want something changed, how do you do it? Who do you talk to, right? You're having a structural conversation. You're now figuring out, huh, I didn't know that janitors had to go through X, Y, and Z. Why is that? You can't tell the superintendent like I would. He's probably also thinking, oh, I've never had that, never thought about that before. Maybe I should ask why, right? So you're doing structure at a personal level, right? So it isn't either or. Now that conversation might lead to something where you're like, wait a second, we can write a letter to the school board. So I'm not saying don't ever just go right to the structure, but there's a way to make it a much more intimate process. Does that help? Okay. Questions? Michaela Hayford. Can you introduce yourself to everyone so they know why I'm so excited about you?
My name is Michaela Hayford, and I'm a senior here.
And you've been the co-president of the...
I was the president of the African American Society last year, and I was one of the co-founders of the We Belong Here movement in 2014.
Thank you.
And I was also Professor Joseph's student last year. So my question was about internal racism, and I was wondering if you could expand on your perspective in challenging internal racism in yourself, and also your approaches for challenging it in others.
Yes, so Michaela's asking about internalized racism and my perspectives on challenging it in yourself and challenging in others. Thank you for asking this, because again, I think this is the most dangerous, the most powerful form of racism. And sadly, we've lost that battle, right? So if we know our history, we know that there was intentional actions hundreds of years ago to transform the way that black people thought about themselves, what they thought they could be. Many of you know, of course, slaves were not allowed to read, So right there, you just got an example. How are we going to make sure these slaves don't revolt and don't rise up and don't request stuff? Well, let's forbid them from reading. But then you create an image of a community as an illiterate community. And then we wonder why we're here in the problems we have. So they've won, right? Those folks who really deviously schemed about how to get in everyone's head, white and black, that whites were superior, and we have to be comfortable talking about white supremacy. I have colleagues who aren't. They say, Mark, that's not helpful. That makes people think of the Nazis when you say white supremacy. Fine, that is exactly one of the elements, but people should also think about America when they think of white supremacy. So that narrative is in our heads, white supremacy and black inferiority. I was in a session, some of you heard me tell this story, a diversity session, kind of like a Diversity 360, and there was a black woman probably in her 50s, and she was listening intently and she was thinking, and you could tell the wheels were just turning, and she said to the group, as we're talking now, I'm realizing that back at my house right now, I have a room of the house that we keep the furniture covered in plastic. And those of you familiar with African American culture, and there may be other cultures, we do that, right? There are families who will keep the plastic over the stuff to keep it in its pristine condition. So we'll never get a stain on it, right? Very economical. You've spent and you saved to get that furniture. Of course, we're not hardworking, as we heard, but you get that furniture, you keep the plastic on. She said, the room that has the plastic over the furniture, the pristine, clean room in the house, I call that the white side of the house. African American woman. I tell my kids, go get the book in the white side of the house. That's language that she uses every day. She's not a bad person, she's racist. That's a racist, that's internalized racism, and she's passing it on to her children. The white room in the house. So I need to just finish with the question about what do we do about that? Super hard, but that anecdote tells you something, right? Even that person, something about that safety of that setting that allowed her to even just allow herself to think that. Because obviously she'd never had that thought before. She had that thought before, she wouldn't be calling it the white side of the house. She'd be calling it the white side of the house for who knows how long. So something in that session helped unlock that, and she felt safe enough to share it. So then who else heard something in that room that went, wait a second, I call my favorite backpack my white backpack, right? And I'm gonna stop saying, why are you acting white when you're reading all the time? What do you think you are, better than us, right? It starts to, so there's something about, it's the same awareness to vigilance theory of change, but it's just the self-awareness that it starts with. And it takes, that's why the racial equity buddy part, you've gotta get some safety and vulnerability. That's not something you can just out of the blue start saying to someone, like, I think you're suffering from internalized racism, right? So this stuff takes that time and that relationship. It takes real thoughtfulness and care, but it's critical. If we don't name it, and she goes through and her kid starts calling it the white side of the house, and their grandchildren are calling it the right side of the house. Slavery, right? If you think about it, 350 years of slavery, 9 generations of grandmothers, children, grandchildren, children, children, right? Think how much got baked in over that period of time. So we have to just start taking the steps to unbake it. Thank you for that question.
So my question is relating to what you're talking about now. From the perspective of we're the winners, what motivates me to want to change internally? Because I'm the winner. So why do I need to change? What am I, basically, what am I going to lose if my thought pattern is like that? And if my perception is nothing, then why change?
Love it, love it. Thank you so much. So there's a number of ways to come at that question. Oh, thank you. The question is, let's say I'm one of the winners, right? I might not think of myself, well, I probably do think of myself as a winner, but I know I'm doing well in society. My kids are doing fine. I see those people over there struggling, and I'm hearing me say, well, we have to care about this and we have to be vigilant, and I'm saying, why do I have to change anything if I'm one of the winners? So one way to come at this is just basic, and this might be the most kind of basic, self-interest, economic way to go about it. we are all going to go down together. We are all going to go down together. You can think you're fine right now. You can think you've got all your... America is going to go down together. It will not be a preeminent civilization. Now, it might take 500 years. I don't know. It's speeding up right now with China. Is kind of... Seriously, I mean, you go to the continent of Africa. Kwame can tell you this. Michaela, you were there. Nancy. Go to the continent of Africa right now. Ask who's the preeminent civilization on Earth. You will see Chinese in villages in Africa, building roads, bridges across the entire continent. And by the way, where's the greatest source of not vibranium, but minerals, wealth on the planet is in Africa. This is not tomorrow, this is today. Go to any African major city today and ask who's running the planet. So we're all going to go down together. That's an economic, right? If we don't figure out, because if we've got a country where we've got we've got a city right now with the majority of people being left behind, 30, 32, 33% poverty, a third. How do you have a thriving city with a third of the people in poverty? We don't. You can fool yourself and tell you there's this great turnaround in Cleveland, and it'll feel good, and we'll win some championships and some stuff will happen. But we're going down as a country if we do not figure out, especially as we get more diverse. So that's the economic angle. Here's the other one. This is the more real answer. You're not a winner. You're losing along with the rest of us. And let's just talk through your daily walk. You can't go everywhere you want to go. You can't go anywhere in Cleveland you want to go. You have all the power, all the money. You're going to walk down any street in your city? No, you're not. It's how powerful are you really if there are places you can't go in your own city and feel safe. You're really a winner, but you can't walk around? Are we really winning that way? You're not winning, you're losing. And guess what? It's chipping away at you. One of the places I do a lot of work is San Francisco. They're on the front edge of this because it's becoming such a disparate city. You walk around San Francisco, those who've been there, you're walking around the homeless, right? And the disparity, the wealth, you can just see it on the way people carry themselves. Trust me, there's a trauma that they are living with. They may not name it, they may not know it, they're experiencing it. And when I say these talks in San Francisco, I get nodding heads all around the room. And it's a liberal progressive city, so they're more ready to say, you know what, I'm actually not that healthy the way I've got all the money I want, I got all the job I want. This is not a healthy way to live. So you're not winning. You're losing today, you're being traumatized today, and you're traumatizing your kids. They're gonna go through this same thing. That's a harder conversation to have, but that's a place to get to. Mm-hmm. How are we doing on time? We're doing good. Who else has questions? Some great questions, thank you. Other questions, comments, thoughts? I'm gonna start to call on people. Betsy Banks, talk to me. I'm so glad you're here. Everyone know Betsy Banks?
Everybody.
She runs Cecil.
Well, I was wondering, how can we have everybody on campus here this semester? You know, we were talking about Diversity 360. Can we have some of this like infused in something that all of us are talking about?
What do you think? You have influence over thousands of students.
Yeah, will you come to our training on September 28th?
Actually, you're lucky on that date. Tell her why, Melanie. Why is she lucky that she said September 28th? Yes, you do. What I told you this morning. What was my big announcement about my speeches?
Oh, but he's not giving more speeches.
Until October 1st.
Okay, we'll
So I'll
change
make an
the date.
exception. Seriously, first of all, I figure people are getting tired of hearing from me, so partly you want to leave them wanting more. I've had a number of speeches. Lisa Vehey's been at all of them. You are like, you could give this speech at this point. As you've been whispering in your ear, he's going to say this next. So, sure, let's get it on the calendar. Be happy to do it and happy to think about it. I mean, I do have a challenge, my own challenge right now. Like after I gave this speech in the fall, I got a bunch of calls to come talk to a bunch of great places. And I can't be everywhere at once. So partly what we're trying to do is build out a team. Mark Chupp was here, Heather Lentz was here. They're doing some of this work, so there's a team of us. So it might not be me every time. For you, it'll be me. But we also have to figure out how to get more people able to carry the message. Kwame there is one of my mentees. He's gonna be carrying the message as well. One of these days will be Kwame. So yeah, but that's exactly the point, right? How do we get this in front of other people? It's been live streamed. We've recorded it. So this is on video. Anyone can watch it. Anyone anywhere can watch it. So we can get access to it. Thanks, Betsy. But happy to work with you on that. All right, see what happens when I call on people? That's not good. Call on people, I get a speech to give.
One question from the live stream.
Wonderful. Okay. In the meantime, anyone got a question or a thought? Edna, you got a question? What are you thinking, Edna? This is Edna Wade, who is a great administrator at the Mandel School. She looks out for me, keeps an eye on me. She always puts a pep in my step. What are you thinking? I know you're thinking some stuff.
I was thinking, could you share with them the mixed income neighborhood Cascade Village and the success that that area had with different income, mixtures of home ownership, Section 8, different educational levels? Could you just share a little?
I sure can. I'll do it really quickly because we do need to wrap up. So Edna was involved with us. So in our mixed income work, there's a mixed income development called Cascade Village in the north of Akron. And it's about 12 years old now. It was transformed from a public housing development, as she was describing. It's got a mix of folks, all different income levels, owners and renters. And so it's exactly the kind of platform where we want to see some of this engagement happening. We did an evaluation there. We found that there were a number of things that people liked about the community and felt very positive. But where they felt there needed to be much more work was in building a community within that housing. And so that's led us to get very focused in our current work on what we call the social dynamics of mixed income communities. We know how to build gorgeous mixed income developments. We actually know how to get people from a range of places there. The challenge is once they're there, how do you get them to not just play out the same old issues? And that takes a whole another layer of work. So Edna was involved in doing surveys. So we actually talked to a lot of the residents who were there. Thank you for prompting that. I think we're going to have to wrap up. Okay, do you have it now or should we just? Okay, great. Emily Geyer, another one of my racial equity buddies from Shaker Heights. Thank you for being here. Nope, it's you.
So just quickly, working with youth, I just want to ask a more pragmatic question of what's a way, or have you thought about getting these type of talks geared toward middle school and high school, even elementary school communities? And right now we're listening to our youth, right now there's talk about how they are leading the way with their wisdom. And I think we don't want to leave them out of this discussion. So I'm just thinking I work at a middle school, I'd love to see a whole series all around in all white districts and mixed districts somehow.
It's a great question. I mean, number one, we have a lot of existing committees, activities. So at Shaker Heights, we have the Student Group on Race Relations, we have the MAC Scholars. So they're existing groups. I don't know how sharp their racial equity analysis is, and I don't know how actionable their work is. I know they've got a lot of great things that they do. So I would say that's the first step, is to say, can we infuse some of these ideas into those groups?
Those communities to start asking these questions more
I think
incisively.
it's a series. I mean, you could take this card and go talk to the director of SCORE and say,
I will.
What do you think about structure, perception, belonging? Does that make sense? Does that resonate? I think what I tried to do was not dumb it down, but synthesize it down so that you could easily say, okay, how would we talk to youth about structure? We certainly can talk about perception, identity, and we could easily talk about them. They could talk to us about belonging, right? So I think it translates. I just think we need to put in the time to figure out who to get in front of and how to make that happen. But to your point, make it a priority, right? And not just have it happenstance. All right, I think we need to stop there. Oh, we have one more, okay.
So we have a question from Beck on the live stream. And they ask, as an African-American graduate student, I want to see more professors and researchers that look like me. What are we doing to increase our PI diversity? What can we do in the future to promote this, because there isn't a lack of African Americans in higher education?
It's a great question. Hopefully, what was their name? Beck?
Beck.
Beck, all right, thanks for the question. Hopefully you were on the line when you heard that our next provost at Case Western Reserve is an African-American man. So that is hugely exciting. And I'm guessing that having an African-American as a provost is going to help us attract other African-American men and women and other people of color to campus. I know for a fact, because it was part of my own recruitment to campus, that the successive administrations have been thinking really, really hard about how to get out there and recruit, how to support, for example, bringing your spouse to campus, right? Because they know that it's a family issue. How can they make it possible? So for example, when I first came in, Melanie was working on campus, the Mandel School was actually supporting part of her salary for several years, maybe like 3 years, right? It was an incentive that we knew if she could find somewhere on campus where it fit her work, and it turned out the School of Engineering, perfect fit, right? That then the Mandel School, because they were hiring me, would subsidize that for a period of time. So there's ways to think about incentives. We can ask the question, is that incentive still active right now? Do we need to broaden it in some ways? So I think we can be strategic at that level, but the best thing to do is to change the climate on campus. If you've got your city council people being racial profiled, you're gonna have a harder time attracting black faculty. So working on the stuff we need to work on, doing the vigilance everyday stuff, figuring out how our police are being trained, that's part of the work as well. So I think you can attack it from both levels. So it's a great question, but I think it is one that is solvable. We can certainly do much better than 3%. All right, with that, we are truly gonna end.
Let's say thank you again to Dr. Joseph.
Thank you, thank you.